Hello, everybody. All right. So, nice to see you all here again. Sean has a question for us right out of the bat. I've watched some videos of trumpet players squeaking out a triple C or higher. If they actually had the note, wouldn't it be a full sound, or are the notes that high just squeaks? I think that there's no straight ahead answer for that, right? I have heard of trumpet players that could play in that register, and trumpet players have like sayings that they use. The guy could burn a laser hole in the back of the room, right? Stuff like that. The truth is that, hello, Gabriel. The truth is they're always on the microphone. Let me tell you about me, right? So when I'm playing in that register myself, it sounds squeaky to me. Okay, let me get my other horn. I've been practicing on the pudgy, so this horn's been sitting since Monday. Now, I'm going to play up to G. And that's okay, right? I would still like that to be a little bigger. But once I go past that, it really does get squeaky. Actually, now that I'm doing it now, it doesn't sound so squeaky. But this is more squeaky than I would like. Let's put it that way. And it's not, let's put it this way. It's not big and it's not loud. And why am I telling you about this? Because on Monday, I had the opportunity to be I think they called me the featured clinician. So I worked with the band on Sunday from 2 o'clock to 7. And then I performed. So I'm conducting the band, I'm rehearsing the band, and then I'm doing a little bit of playing with the band. I played one full solo, a couple little diddlies here and there, and then I played one song that was mine. I played the whole tune. And I think I played, I want to say 4 or 5 different Super Cs in that concert. And it was loud. It sounded like those famous high note guys playing in that register. And in fact, normally when I'm improvising, I wouldn't like go that high. And I don't remember if I actually did this in the improv. So I don't remember everything that I did. All I remember is that I kept hitting these super C's, and I kept doing it more because it was just ringing up the whole room. But that wasn't me. That was the microphone. The fact that the microphone was correct meant that when I was playing those notes, it sounded the way it was supposed to sound. If I tried to play those notes, in fact, there's a recording of me playing stuff in that register on YouTube. I'm not going to share a link with it. But here I am playing a screeching trumpet part. The saxes are not only mic'd, but turned to 11. You can barely hear the trumpets as a section throughout the whole recording. You can barely hear the trombones. It's like a rock rhythm section in terms of volume. It's not a rock thing, it was a big band thing. But it was really, really loud rhythm section, almost as loud saxophones. And the rest, the trumpets and the trombones are unmiked. And here I am playing just as well as I was playing on Monday night. And it sounds squeaky. So really, the technology now am I saying that when someone plays now I say double C, I don't call it triple C. Hello, Karen. I don't. So the way I name the notes is low C is beneath the staff. I call it tuning note C on the staff, and then high C, and then double high C is the highest one, or super C, right? Um, so I don't use the word triple. I understand when people say triple. I understand what they mean. But anyway, so on the one hand, I'm saying, just because you hear someone that sounds like they're squeaking doesn't mean that's how they sound. You give that person the same amplification that they've given everybody else, and there's a good chance that that player actually is a player and that they actually have those notes. And you can take someone who's famous. I'm not saying this is true about all of them, but you can take some of these guys that are famous for their high notes, put them in the same situation as I was in, where everybody is mic'd but me, and they will sound squeaky. Okay? So, but are there some people that can only just squeak the notes out? Yes, there is such a thing. I'm saying don't trust your ears. Even on YouTube, don't trust your ears. Because what you're hearing there is not the full package. Gabriel says, if we play the last white piano key, it sounds squeaking, doesn't it? Yes. So, you know what? The example I like to give is the violin. The violin has such a rich sound. But when you get up onto those really, really high notes, it sounds squeaky. Now, in theory, let's talk about this a little. Oh, Sean says they said today's squeak is tomorrow's note. So, I've heard a lot of high note players. I've heard a lot. I mean live in person. I've heard a whole bunch of high note players. The first one I ever heard, and I heard him I think 5 times before I left El Paso. During the time I lived in El Paso, I heard Maynard Ferguson 5 times. And I have a theory about why that happened. But yes, I heard Maynard. I heard Arturo Sandoval, I think 3 or 4 times. And here's the thing. These guys have reputations of being that loud. But every time I heard them, they were on a microphone. And nobody would ever accuse either one of those guys of having a squeaky sound, right? I'm just saying, every time I heard them, they were on a microphone. Same thing with, what's the Christian high note guy's name? I can't remember his name. Phil Driscoll. Same thing with Phil Driscoll. Every time I've ever heard him, he's been on a microphone. How big of a sound does he have? I wouldn't know, right? I wouldn't know because I haven't heard him play raw ever, except for while he's warming up beforehand, right? Now, in theory, the lore says that there are players that can play extremely loud up there. That's the theory. I myself have not heard it without a microphone. So, I think using me as an example, I'm going to go as far as to say that this concert I played on Monday was the very first time that me as a high note player was ever mic'd properly. In my entire career, that was the first time me as a high note player that I was ever mic'd properly. And to hear that sound, you guys know that I'm not much of a high note guy. If every high note gig was like that, I would be sold on the idea. Right? If every gig was like that, I would now be a high note guy. I would now tell everybody, yeah, I like the high notes because that was good. Okay? That was good. But good luck with that. Unless you're the artist that they hired and you get to call all the shots. And that's what was happening on that gig on Monday. That's what the guy, that's what he did. He said, I want you to run everything. I want you to be the guy that makes all these decisions. And I made rehearsal decisions. I made a lot of decisions like that. And he asked me at one point about microphones and whether I should have a monitor and stuff like that. And it was really the perfect setup for high note playing. And when I tell you guys that I hate playing high notes, the image I have in my head of playing high notes is that other image where the band is cranked up to 11. And because we're trumpet players and we play loud, we have no microphone. And here I'm going, because I can't hear myself. And I go home thinking, why am I doing this? It sounds awful. It feels awful. I almost hate myself after the gig. So that's all I'm trying to say is technology has a lot to do with it. I probably wouldn't have answered, if you had asked me that same question a week ago, I might not have answered the same way because I just had this recent gig. And to hear those super C's come out like that, it was just, yeah, it was just something I don't get to experience much in my lifetime. Gabrielle says, what is the psychology of being obsessed with the super high register? I have no clue. Well, okay, so have you seen my video, The High Note Trap? if you've seen the high note trap, it actually explains that. The high note trap is when people get fixated on what's easy to see or easy to hear instead of those more subtle aspects of music, right? Yeah, look it up on YouTube. It's called the high note trap, and basically what I spell out, it's not just high notes playing loud and playing fast. Basically, what I say in that video is that the people who are obsessed with it are typically, and I'm not saying everybody falls in this category, they're typically unable to discern other more mature aspects, right? I mean, think about it. If I play a low note or a high note, who can hear that? Just about everybody. The percentage of people who can't tell the difference between a low note and a high note is a very, very low percentage. Just about everybody can say, oh, wow, that was a high note. What about fast and slow? If someone plays something slow and then they play it fast, who can tell? Just about everybody. And same thing with loud. If someone plays something soft and then they play it loud, who can tell? Just about everybody. But if you have a phrase that's got vibrato on it and nice phrasing and very subtle tempo changes, who can tell that? Not everybody. Gabriel says, if I have to choose among great sound or a higher note, I would prefer the sound. Absolutely. I have another video that I call bad trumpet playing. And I even talk about that in the video itself. I had to redo that video and redo the video and redo the video over and over again because I didn't want that video to come out as me saying, you know what, so-and-so is a terrible player. But I was motivated to make the video because there's people on YouTube that are truly terrible players that people like just because they can play high. They've got terrible sound, they have terrible sense of phrasing, they have terrible style. I even go as far as to say in the video that I have junior high students who are better trumpet players than they are. Being able to play high does not make you a better trumpet player. And yes, so when you hear some of these high note players play, go to that video, go to bad trumpet playing or something like that, and watch that video. There are actually some high note players on YouTube that play with no style, no phrasing. All they do is play as notes. It's just no, 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 no. And the people who cannot hear those subtleties that make it musical will flock to those players because they can play high. And you know what's bizarre? One of them said, well, I'm not just a high note player. I can play fast too. And so he's playing some stuff fast. Can your band director play that fast? Can your trumpet teacher play that fast? And the thing is he's playing fast and sloppy. He can't even tell that it sounds awful. He has no clue just how bad what he's playing sounds to an educated ear. So even if he could play fast and high, he's still an awful player. I'm not going to say who it is because that's not how I operate. And the truth is, it's not just one. I know of at least three or four people that they probably have 3, 4 times as many subscribers as I have, and it's because they play high and teach how to get the high notes. Um, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with them doing what they do. My job here is to help people understand what's wrong with what they're doing, in terms of the pedagogy, right? We don't. My job is to help people see that there's more to playing trumpet than just playing high, fast, and loud. There's a reason why that's a joke amongst the professional musicians, right? If someone does a high note solo in the middle of a gig, the other guys are gonna higher, faster, louder, higher, faster, louder, right? They're making fun of you when they say that. They're mocking you because they know that there's more to music than just that immediately understandable aspect of what people hear. So now, on a rare occasion, on really, really rare occasions, there there are great players that go and take lessons with those people because they don't have the high notes and they want to learn how to play high from somebody that can play high, even though to me it makes no sense, right? But it happens. So you might have, for example, the last time I heard of this, it was somebody in a symphony orchestra. The guy didn't have the kind of range he felt like he needed, so he goes and takes lessons with a high note guru. And hello, free. So he goes takes some lessons with a high note guru, and he wants to add that quote unquote skill to the rest of his playing. And in fact, you know what? A lot of I don't know how it is today. I don't follow the orchestra stuff today. But in the 80s, a lot of the orchestra guys were treating range as a separate skill. That's part of why I called my book The One Range, because of that attitude that you separate range as a activity that you work on. So you have your long tones to work on sound, you have your lip slurs to work on flexibility, and then they would have a separate part of their practice day to work on range. To me, that makes absolutely no sense. That's that's like a carpenter saying, "Man, I really want to start working on my inches. I want to really get better at inches. Or I want to get better at feet. Or if you're living in another country, I want to get better at meters. I'm going to have a day where I actually work on meters." That's to me how ludicrous that sounds. I'm going to work on my range. The range is the measurement of your lowest note to your top note. You can say, I want to expand my range, but when you work on your range, you're not expanding anything. All you're doing is playing notes you can't play. Right? If you don't have the skill to play those notes and you make yourself go to that register anyway, you don't have one range. You've got now two ranges. You have a different embouchure, a different setup, a different something, because you can't, that's where you get these guys that have to unset the mouthpiece and to go to a different register. So no, I'm not a big fan of that. Anyway, that's like 25 minutes of talking about high notes. Woo! I think that's a first for this Q and A session. Huh? I don't think we've ever talked that much about high notes before. Gabriel says, Eddie, do you think air attack on the first note of a melodic study is a mistake? Is the tongue attack better? Is there any rule about that? No, I don't think there's a rule about that, and there's nothing wrong with having depending on the context, nothing wrong with an air attack at the first, depending on the context. Now, if it's because you're saying a melodic study, now most melodic studies have nice phrasing things, and so the beginning of the phrase is going to be softer and gentler, and no, there's nothing wrong with having a very, very, very soft attack in a melodic study. And that carries over into melodic lyrical stuff in your performances. Nothing wrong with doing a breath attack on that either. So that's a good question. No, the truth is there's no rules about anything except for culturally, right? Let's look at it that way. So you live in Italy. Let's say there's an Italian trumpet competition, and you want to compete, you want to win, and everybody there, the culture there is everything has to be crisply tongued. Now we've got rules because that's part of the culture. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now we've got rules, cultural rules. So it's not a musical rule in the sense that thou shalt do this because that's how all trumpet players do it. No. If you want to win that competition, you need to learn how to tongue crisply on every, I'm just using, I don't know anything about any Italian competitions, right? But I just know that that's how that kind of thing works. They have their preferences, and if you don't play according to those preferences, you're not going to win. And in that sense, yes, there are rules, but the rules are not going to be consistent from one culture to the next. So that's something to keep in mind. All right. Trumpet 88 miles per hour says, when I first crossed the line between beginner and intermediate, I reached the mindset of everything being enjoyable, even the difficult parts of practice. And I'm going to skip down. But now, as a skilled player, I notice when I play, all skills just tie together. Articulation, tone, range, it all connects. That's correct. I agree with that. I tell people that playing by ear is a holistic practice, and everybody who plays well plays by ear. I think most great trumpet players would agree with me on that. If your ear is not involved, then you're not really playing that well. Okay, so to me, playing by ear is a holistic thing. Playing by ear is not just hearing the note and playing it. Everything that goes with that note, the embouchure position, the teeth position, the style of the articulation, the support, all of this stuff works together. The fingerings, how hard you slam down the fingerings, or if you're doing it lightly, all of that comes together as a holistic package. So when we hear and play, it's not just the notes. And I think that's very close to kind of what you're saying. We hear and we play, but we hear everything and we feel everything that goes with what we hear. That's why we can veg out. We can have almost an quote unquote out of body experience while we're playing, because the process of practicing creates this automatic thing, so that when we hear it in our head, we feel it in our body, and then we play it and we execute, and it works. Okay. Yes, I agree with that. Sean says, I just listened to a podcast, and the principal of the Philadelphia Symphony said they had 200 applicants that needed to work on rhythm and intonation. Didn't talk about range at all. That's correct. That's correct. Yep. You know, those auditions are, to some degree, almost a farce. Those auditions are, because they'll take those 200 applicants and say none of them are qualified for our orchestra, right? No one is good enough to play with us. That just, to me, that's just insulting. Hello, Santo Domingo. Nice to see you again. Hi, Mr. Lewis. Hope you doing really well. Could you explain what's the real difference between a cornet and a trumpet? Because in my opinion, there's no huge difference in tone between them. Okay, that's because most people who play a cornet play the wrong mouthpiece. And now, so I'm going to answer first that the biggest difference is stylistic, not sound. The biggest difference between cornet and trumpet is a stylistic difference. You play cornet, trumpet. You play cornet differently than you do trumpet. It's supposed to be different. All right. So, and with that difference comes a very different kind of mouthpiece. The mouthpiece on a cornet should be a V-shaped mouthpiece. And what happens a lot of times is people use the default mouthpiece, which is a C cup, just like the C cup on the trumpet. You know, a lot of people say that this trumpet plays like a cornet. Anyway, so it's not a cornet, it's a trumpet. But I have what would be almost like a cornet mouthpiece. So that's the biggest thing. Well, second biggest thing. Biggest thing is that it's a different style. Second biggest thing is that it's a V cup mouthpiece. But what is the difference? The difference is that the cornet is conical, more conical. Not so the trumpet is also conical. It's just that it's not as conical. Okay, when you look at the overall picture of the tubing on the trumpet, it is conical. It starts off small and it ends big. Okay, but the tubing in the middle is supposed to stay consistent throughout. Whereas on the cornet, the tubing throughout the tubing in the middle is supposed to continue to expand in size. That's my understanding. So it is different. It is definitely different. Okay. Now, there's two things at play that cause people to think that trumpet and cornet sound the same. There's two things at play. Both of them have to do with familiarity. We'll start on the listener side first. On the listener side is that a lot of people aren't skilled enough to hear the difference. All right. Some people just don't have that skill. They cannot hear the difference because to them everything brassy sounds the same. After many, many, many years of hearing both back and forth, you begin to hear a difference between the two. But the same is also true on the other side. Is that a lot of times people um, who are playing the cornet or playing the trumpet don't actually manifest those differences. So if you play the cornet like a trumpet, more people are going to think it sounds like a trumpet. I say this through by theory, right? Because I'm not a cornet player. I would love to be a cornet player, but I've never really had the equipment to do that. Um, but this is the theory behind the difference between the trumpet and the cornet. All right, Sean says, "What is your opinion of the Bob Reeves valve alignments? Legit or a scam?" I think it's legit. Okay, now here's the thing. Um, just like I was just saying with the cornet and the trumpet, would a beginner benefit from a Bob Reeves alignment? I don't think so. Just like a beginner wouldn't benefit from having a Monet or having a Blackburn or having a very, very expensive trumpet. Um, the beginner is not qualified enough, not experienced enough, not familiar enough with the instrument to know the difference. So where if a beginner can't benefit from it, when does that happen? At what point do you say, "Oh, I need an?" Let me put it this way: I don't have an alignment on my horn, and the reason is I don't think I would know the difference. So, is it legit? I actually think it's legit. I think it makes a difference. Will I notice a difference? Will my people who listen to me notice a difference? That I can't be so sure about, but it does make a difference. Absolutely. Trumpet 88 says, "I have so many different mouthpieces." Yeah, there you go. Karen says, "We have band music with parts for trumpet and cornet. I don't understand the difference." Okay, so that's exactly so if that band music was written properly, the cornets, you got to remember that's cultural, right? The cornet was the original instrument. In the band, the cornet was the instrument that was part of the band. The trumpets came later. Cornet was the band instrument. Trumpets were associated with fanfares and that kind of less skilled, less um, technical stuff. And so the cornet parts will have the more melodic stuff in it, and the trumpet parts will go bup, ba, da, bup, 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 or have da, 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 right? They'll have more fanfare type stuff, right? But it's because of that part of it is a cultural thing. What the trumpets used to do and what the cornets used to do, those were two different jobs. Okay? Those were two different jobs. And so when you write a piece for band that has trumpets and cornets, you're supposed to keep that in mind. It's not because of the sound. I mean, the sound is different, yes, but that's not what it is. There's a whole role that goes with that. There's a whole role that goes with, okay, this is the cornet section, which is more like a clarinet section compared to the trumpets, right? They play more virtuosic stuff. They play. Um, all right, Sean, see you. I hope that makes sense. The the tradition of what the cornets used to do um, is very different from what we would call a trumpet part. So, any other questions? You know, I try in these Q and A's to not sound like I think I know everything. Most of this stuff is just my opinion. Um, you know, I listened to a podcast. Speaking of podcasts, since Sean brought that up, I listened to a podcast where these guys present themselves as the ultimate what do you call it? The ultimate um, authority on the subject of anything related to trumpet. And uh, you know, that's just not possible. There is no such thing as an ultimate authority. And it goes to my opinion now of all people in authority, right? So let's say you want to go to the doctor. I think what frightens me more than a doctor who says he doesn't know, a doctor who says, "Oh, I don't know what's wrong with you. Let's work together to figure out what's going on here." I would much rather work with that doctor than the doctor that says, "Oh yes, of course I've got 8 years of university and I've been practicing for this long, and so of course I know. And how dare you question me?" Right? Um, I would much rather go to the guy who says, "You know what? I don't have all the answers." I think we as a society today, we want people that have all the answers, but that's not real. There is nobody like that. The people who tell you they've got all the answers are lying to you. So, and I feel the same way about trumpet teachers, you know. So I try not to present what I have to say, whether it be in this Q and A or in the lessons themselves. And yes, I do understand that I would have more students. I would make more sales. If I could portray myself as an authority on these subjects, I know I would be more commercially successful. I know that. I choose to align myself with truth, not with that flim flammery. Okay. So anyway, Free says, "What do you think about European orchestra trumpet players and U.S. orchestra players?" Now, it used to be that there was a huge difference between the two. Today, it's not so true anymore. Um, Now, better or worse, I don't go there. I don't believe in better or worse in anything in music. I don't believe in that. I who I've been telling people my whole career I am fundamentally opposed to musical competitions. I am fundamentally opposed to musical competitions because how do you decide who's quote unquote better? There's no such thing as better. What you really mean is I like this guy, not that guy. It's all subjective. I don't care how you try to change it, to wrap it, to present it. It's still just subjective. The only time that it becomes less subjective is when it's within the culture. Now, if you're going to be within the culture, you have to do things a certain way. So I don't have an opinion. You know, in the 80s and the 90s when I was studying orchestral music, the music teachers here in the United States had a bad opinion, a bad attitude, I think, towards the European orchestras. I don't know why. I don't get that. I really don't. Um, but no, I don't. So when you ask me what do I think all of the orchestra, all of the orchestras around the world used to sound different from each other. Chicago didn't sound like Boston didn't sound like Cincinnati, didn't sound like Cleveland, didn't sound like LA. They all had their own special sounds. And in fact, I heard an interview with, I think it's Eugene Ormandy. The he was asked, why does the Philadelphia Symphony sound different the way it does? And he said because they did equal temperament as their intonation, um, which implies that the other orchestras weren't at the time doing equal temperament. Now, if you expand that now to the other orchestras in other countries, the same was just as true. It used to be that Berlin didn't sound like um, London, didn't sound like. What you see what I mean? It used to be that those orchestras, Vienna, St. Petersburg, all these different orchestras, great orchestras, right? They used to all sound different. And in the modern age, they are becoming more homogeneous each year. And that's part of the reason, my main reason, I never do anything for just one reason, right? I never do anything. If I just have one reason, then I just, like if I want to quit my job and the reason is I just don't like my boss, I'm not going to quit for one reason. I don't care how bad the boss is. But if I have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 reasons, then I'll quit. And the same thing, when I quit pursuing orchestra stuff, there were a bunch of reasons. The main reason was my hearing loss, but the other one was that it had become so homogenous like this. And I don't want to have, I'm not interested in that. I really am not interested in that kind of job because with that homogenous sound from all around all these orchestras, you have now turned the orchestra trumpet position into a job. I mean, just a job. There's nothing expressive about it. There's nothing interesting about it. There's nothing unique about it. You can do that in this orchestra, that orchestra, that orchestra. It's all the same. Who cares? It's now just a job. You might as well be flipping burgers, as far as I care. So that's another reason why I stopped pursuing orchestra. But anyway, back then, the orchestras were all very different from each other. Gabriel says, so what is the best way to play cornets? More melodic or what else? No, it's a whole. I couldn't summarize that in a single Q and A. And I don't want to even sound like I'm an expert on this, right? The best way to learn that is to just listen to some cornet music. It really does. Now, that's kind of hard to do though today because there's a lot of people that are putting cornet on their recordings and it's not really cornet music. They might be playing a cornet, but they're not playing it within that tradition. So I don't think I have an answer for that one. Now, some people will say it's more mellow, so therefore, when you listen to those old Herbert L. Clark things, he wasn't playing mellow. He was actually quite, what's the word? Starts with a aggressive. He was actually quite aggressive the way he played. And I have theories about that too. I have theories about the change in vibrato, the change in articulation and stuff like that, about why that stuff changed so much in 100 years. I think it has a lot to do with the recording technology. If you think about how things had to be before there was PA systems, how things had to be, you really had to grab people's attention acoustically, and that required a whole different approach before there was technology like this. So I don't think it's safe to say more mellow or something like that. I think that's actually a almost a bastardization of what true cornet playing actually is. And you got to keep in mind also, by the way, that there's the American style of cornet playing and a European style of cornet playing. Is not the same. So Gabriel says, since on the Arvin and or Clark books they say method for cornet or trumpet, it looks like they can be played in the same way. That's what I'm saying. So this is where that comes from, right? So the original person to ask this, I'm scrolling up here. Is Santo Domingo, right? He asked, what's the difference between cornet, because he can't hear a difference. And that's because, if people are not doing a difference, then there's less of a difference to be heard, right? And that's why, that's an indication, right? If trumpet and cornet, for the most part, they play the same way. The way we physically play those instruments is the same. So the fingering stuff is all the same. The aperture, all that stuff, the physical side of it is the same. What's different is the more stylistic and the overall approach to how we play. What else? Any other questions? Any other questions? So Gabriel says American cornet is more used in jazz. Maybe there was that, but the cornet tradition existed in America before jazz existed. So the cornet tradition goes back about 100 years before jazz started. Free says, "Are you going to write new books this year?" So I've already got one new book out this year. That's the beginner level tonalization study book. I call it the Trumpet Pioneer Tonalization Studies. Last time I checked on Amazon, it wasn't there yet. I have no control about over how long it takes to get onto Amazon. Let me see if it's there yet. It's been over 2 weeks now. It should be there. Nope. See, that's frustrating. I'm going to have to ask them what's going on. Yeah, it's been over 2 weeks. And so, but we have, so the next Trumpet Chops book is the next one on the list. And my wife is working on a cover for it right now. So that's the Trumpet Chops Master. That's the same as the book that you were talking about last week, but instead of stopping at high C, it goes up to the E above high C. And then after that, I've got 2 duet books that I want to publish. I'm hoping that all 4 of these are published before the end of the year. That's what I'm shooting for. So the first duet book is my my Christmas trumpet Christmas carol duets. We'll be publishing that as the third book this year. And then the other one is a trumpet player trumpet duet book, so that throughout the whole book, the highest note is the G above the staff. So Gabriel says the British cornet is something different. He's asking me that. Maybe the American cornet is the long cornet and the British. So I think physically they're more alike than they are different. So you can have a British manufactured cornet in a American band. You can have an American manufactured cornet in a British band. I don't think that's the issue. I think there are some stylistic issues in the way the music is played, because in the British cornet is played with the British brass band, which is a whole different culture in and of itself. I met a guy that's from the UK and I asked him, I have his card here somewhere. I asked him if he wouldn't mind sitting down to lunch with me someday and explaining to me all because each section in the brass band has a different role. And I have a piece I want to write for brass band, and I want to write according to those roles. And if I don't know those roles, I'm wasting my time writing the piece. So one of these days I'm going to sit down. Now, so hear me out on this, right? If writing the music is that detailed, that, because I don't think they have any other, it's all brass, right? There's no woodwinds. So you would think all the brass instruments sound the same. So therefore, each one of those sections has a different role in the music. And it's the same thing in the American band. Each section has a different role. What you're there for is a different role. So on the one hand, when we write for that music, we have to understand that role. On the other hand, when you're performing that music, you have to play a certain way to fulfill that role. And by the way, that's why when I write trumpet quartets, I don't do a lot of what other composers do where, okay, so the first is starting to get tired. Let's put the first on the third part for a while so he can rest. I don't do that. There are each one of those parts in the quartet, the quintet, even a trio, each one of those parts has a reason to be there. And if you start switching parts around, those roles are getting mixed up. Now, I think a lot of people, they just think, well, that's just notes. If it's just notes, let me quit music now. If it's just notes, let me quit now. I happen to think that the first trumpet part is different from the second trumpet part, is different from the third trumpet part, is different from the fourth trumpet part. There are different roles. I couldn't necessarily articulate what those roles are, but I can tell you this. If you keep flipping the parts, then the roles are eliminated, and all you're doing now is playing notes. You can maybe play beautiful notes. Maybe you can play melodic, pretty notes. It's still just notes without the role that the instruments play. It's still just notes. So, and if that's true, this is my point. If that is true from a composition perspective, imagine how true it is for the people who should be performing that music. I had a gig with Mary Especiali. I think that's how you say her name. Not just one gig. When she lived here, there's a big band I used to play in, and they would hire her on, and she would play fourth chair. She was the best fourth trumpet player I've ever worked with in my whole life. I'm telling you, she had that roll down, and I know she's accomplished enough that she didn't deserve to be sitting on the fourth chair, right? She's a today she's a famous trumpet player, famous trumpet teacher. But when I was working with her, she's playing the fourth chair, and I told her many times, that's the most amazing fourth trumpet playing I've ever heard in my life. She got the roll down. She understood her role in that band. So yes, that's how I see it. So and if there are roles, then if you have see that it's a huge mistake to think it's all the same. I think part of that comes from our culture today, right? Everything is the same. And even though all you have to do is open your eyeballs and see things are not the same, right? But in our culture, all things are the same. And I think musically now, I think that's how we approach music. All music is the same. The only thing that makes all music the same is that it's all different. That's the only way that it's the same, is that it's all different. So if you're in a brass band, that's not, you could play the same song. You could play in a British brass band, let's say Tchaikovsky, let's say, because I love this piece, um Tchaikovsky Serenade for Strings. Let's say you have an arrangement of that for a British brass band, and you have an arrangement of that for an American style concert band. They should sound different. It's not the same. Because the roles of those instruments in here don't necessarily match up with the roles of those instruments over here. It's not the same. It's not the same. So if we apply that to the difference between the cornet and the trumpet, you can actually say, and in fact, that's a better way to say what I was saying earlier. The difference between the trumpet and an American band, the traditional band. Um, Trumpet had a different role from the cornet in that band. Trumpet was a more melodic instrument, a more lyrical instrument. I got it backwards. So I'm sorry. The cornet was a more lyrical instrument. The trumpet was a more percussive instrument. If you follow the tradition of the trumpet back to its roots, the trumpet was a percussion instrument from the battlefield. And what I was told is that the earliest orchestra music, the trumpets and the drums had the same part. That's how synonymous they were. They would actually give the drums and the trumpets the same part. That's why in a lot of orchestras, I don't see it as much today, but in a lot of orchestras, you see the timpani, and right next to the timpani is the trumpets because they played the same part in a lot of that old stuff. That's what I'm talking about. There are traditional roles. Any other questions? We're a little bit over time. And because of the roles, the way we approach that should not be, oh, I need to practice, practice, practice. What you need to be doing is, if you want to play that kind of music, you start by listening, and then the other thing is you should be out there doing it. Because that's how you're going to learn that role. You learn that role by being in that role. You start off by being like, if there's 5 in the section, you start off by being the 5th one. And the other guys tell you, hey, you're playing too loud. Hey, you're playing too short. Hey, that's too, your crescendos are all wrong. Um, That's that's how this stuff works. Nobody, no teacher could possibly sit you down in a 10 years of lessons and teach you all that you would learn in 1 year of playing with a band in terms of how to fill your role. Now, the trumpet teacher is important, right? I'm not saying that. Trumpet teacher helps you with the skills that it takes to do what you learn while you're there. That's right. There are no shortcuts. Anyway, if you don't have any more questions, we'll call it quits for today. Um, Thanks for hanging out. We will probably not do next week. I think next week is, yeah, next week is a busy, busy, busy week. You're welcome, Gabriel. Um, we'll see you guys next time. God bless you and have a great week. All right. See you next time.